Hello, dear friends, user and fans of the IoT service button. The new next generation service button is available now. So the device looks very much the same as before, but inside it's completely new. So let's dig into the new generation. My name is Werner Kremer and let's start. The new IoT service button comes with a new hardware. This new hardware has a larger processor, more memory, and a new communication module. So the device has new features. LTE-M is now included with a new communication module beside Narrowband IoT. It's now a Hall switch inside, which produces an automatic push of the button. And optionally, you can have a near-field communication for reading of tags, and optionally a temperature sensor with a high accuracy. And also complete new is a cloud service behind that. The main thing is that you have an easy do-it-yourself onboarding of new devices, you have a simple parameter setting, and you have a powerful API. So now let's have a look at the new cloud services. Okay, let's see how it looks if we are entering the new cloud backend service from Gemasi. So this is a home page here, and we see that is version 0.89, the beta version what we look at the moment. So it's not a totally final version, which will come the next week. In the home screen we see how many buttons we have, how many alarms are pending, what the action of which button was the last action is. We see positions if they are there. And if we go now onto the button menu, we see the list of the buttons which are in this tenant. We now have different possibilities to select buttons and to select the parameters. If you look, for example, to that button here on the bottom line, we can show basic informations like the serial number, the name of the button, which can be changed, the time zone, so you can change the time zone of the button. You see the endpoint, that means where the after button action, where the information is forwarded to, in that case to a test email. We also see the alerts, so the device vital values can be placed at least a rule to set up alerts. In that case, at a battery voltage level, you can produce an alert for a low battery voltage level. And you see the response configuration, which is the last step of the action of the service button. In that case, we implemented an API call, which is, if you look here, simply an API call to weather information. This is only to show how easy it is to do an API integration with the service button. Okay, if we go back, then we can go to the edit function. In that edit function, we can change the name of the button and we can change the time zone. And if we go on the location, we see on the map where the button is located. There's a rough location based on the cell ID of the system, not on the GPS, it's on the cell ID. So you see roughly where the button is located. So if we go on the vitals, this is very interesting. So these vitals contains the number of transmitted bytes, of received bytes from that service button. And you see also the rate type, So in that case, it is transmitting via Narrowband IoT, and the reception level, which can be an indication if you have communication problems, for example. The cell ID on which the location is based, and you see some information about the network itself. Last but not least, you have a temperature. In that service button is a temperature sensor implemented with an accuracy of plus minus 0.5 degrees. And you have also here the battery voltage. So as we saw before, here you can place a threshold value here and also the temperature value, a smart rule which indicates if the battery voltage is, for example, lower as a specific value. Okay, so these are the vitals, and they will be transmitted in each situation when the button is pressed. So the button is not always online. These values will come as soon as the action is triggered at the service button and the contact to the backend system is established. Okay, if we go to the alarm endpoints, we can do here configuration. In that case, we have only configured a test email, and we can show what the test email is. So we can define here the text of the test email, and we can implement some values here, and these values are shown here in the short description. So for example, you can integrate the serial number, the event type, whether it's a normal push or whether it's triggered by an Hall switch, by an automatic magnetic trigger, or whether it's triggered by an NFC. And with the event data, for example, you can also transmit the NFC tags in this email. And you can input the location link, so if you want to know where the button is. So all these parameters can simply down with copy paste into that email, so that you can configure whatever you want. So the good thing is that you have also the possibility to define different kind of endpoints. If you look, for example, to this weather endpoint here, then we can edit that, and then we can define how the API should be addressed, what the address of the API is, which parameters can be used for this API addressment. So it's a very easy way to define a new endpoint. And the good thing is, if you go back here to the to this configuration page, then you can add different endpoints. So it's not only one endpoint you can use for the service button, you can add additional endpoints. Okay, so let's go to the alerts. Here we configured the battery voltage alert. So these alerts are performed in the case that we have exceeded a threshold. And here you define this threshold. You have a rule here with a battery. The rule you call a battery voltage, and the operation is if it's smaller than 4.2 volt or 4210 millivolt, then the threshold is triggered, and the endpoint is then an email, which is in that case the name of a low battery email. And simply this email you want to send, you can configure that here in the endpoints. You see that low battery email, and again you can here send the parameters for this email. Okay, so let's go back to our parameter here. The configuration, that's very interesting, how you can now configure the different parameters of the IoT service button in the new generation. So you see first the hardware version, the firmware version. You see what event type is now activated, and there's also event counter, which is simply counting how many actions are triggered by the service button. Then you see the texts here. So these are the texts which are now displayed on the service button, and you can here change the texts, and you see how it looks on the service button. And we can then go on to save, this configuration will be transferred as soon as the service button is pressed the next time. So you can configure the idle text, the approval text. You can configure all the parameters, how long the approval text should be shown before it kicks back to the initial display. We have this success display with a tick showing the transmission was successful. Here you can say how long this should be shown, And of course you can enable the NFC function. You can enable whether it's a single tag or multiple tags should be read. Meaning very simple that if you have a single tag activated, the service button transmit immediately after you put a NFC tag onto the service button. And if you activate the NFC mode, then it waits for additional NFC tags and will transmit then latest after the 10th NFC tag read, so that you can do here configuration whether you want a single or multiple NFC. You can configure the NFC timeout, meaning how long does a service button wait until it sends the NFC, especially in the case of a multiple NFC. And you can here disable or enable the hold switch. You can define whether it's triggered when the hold switch is open or when the hold switch is closed. So we have here the select option. And then you can here also configure how long the hold switch need to be in place, so that before the trigger starts. So all these parameters are used to do a final configuration of the service button. And now we have the response page, where you can define in what manner the service button shall respond to the action before. So you can say no response, so there's no further display after all the process is finished. You can do a simple text, you can do a timed text, meaning that you have the possibility to do timings on it, or you have this API call, which is now used here. And here we define that this is a weather API, which, as we seen before, which we can configure in the endpoints here. If you look, for example, at another button here, let's take this one for example, then we see that in the response type we have a simple text here, for example, service angefordert, and you see here how it will be displayed on the final text, whatever you give in here. And here you can also configure how long it should be displayed. If you take it 0, then it's displayed unlimited, meaning until you press the button again. Or if you do here any other values, it's shown for that time what you are defining here. Okay, so these are basically the functions to configure the service button. And now we have here a very simple icon to delete. This is very interesting. If you go on delete here, we will be asked whether we are sure that you want to delete them. I don't do that at the moment, but if we are killing here the service button, then it's completely thrown out of this tenant. And if we want to onboard a new service button, then we simply go to the onboarding here, meaning we do an add of a service button. We select an automatic onboarding, and now we have simply to enter a PIN code, and this PIN code will be automatically generated by a service button which is not onboarded on any tenant where, however. So if you have a complete new service button, or even one which is deleted from a tenant, and you push on the service button, then you'll get a 6-digit PIN displayed on that service button. And as soon as you onboard this PIN here and go in on onboarding, the button is seen here in your list. So the onboarding process is really pretty easy. Alright folks, so that's for today, and have fun with using the service button.